So, before we delve into the topic of malignant pathological narcissism, I thought we would look at this dynamic related to the Habsburg phenotype. So, this is a little bit more light, a little less heady here before we delve into that topic. And so, what we're going to look at now is the manifestation of this phenotype in the past, and interestingly, manifestations of the phenotype in current times. Now, admittedly, I do not actually see personally a number of people with this particular phenotype, but it has been noted that there is a prevalence of this phenotype for individuals who are in the limelight, those who have prominence, power. A number of celebrities have these Habsburg features. And so there is a dynamic of the scleral show being pretty frequent among those groups of people, but also this Habsburg phenotype dynamic is also very prevalent. And so we're going to look at some of the manifestations. Not only do we see these manifestations of this Habsburg royalty phenotype, but a number of individuals classify celebrities in a sort of royalty way. And so they are seen as American royalty, if you will. Sometimes politicians are seen in the same way. What's also noteworthy is that many of these individuals have names that are indicative of royalty or nobility, or they name their children these names that suggest royalty or nobility. And you can probably think of a number of individuals that do that. It's also noteworthy the individuals that have this type of status that don't have manifestations of that scleral show, and they don't have manifestations of this Habsburg phenotype. But we're going to delve into a number of individuals historically that have this manifestation, and a number of individuals in current times that have the manifestation. And we're going to start off with looking at the actual Habsburgs so that we can see where this is coming from, and then you can see how it's manifested in current times. Now, it's also important to keep in mind that in some instances, it's important to look back at individuals when they were younger in order to get a clear picture of what they were born with versus what they might have had altered over time. One question that comes up is whether individuals who are currently manifesting this Habsburg phenotype, whether they are actually descendants of individuals who would be classified as royal. One of the reasons why this is coming up is because you can tell a lot in terms of ethnicity by a person's teeth, their bone structure. And so this Habsburg dynamic with the teeth and the jaw, it does suggest an ancestral dynamic. And so there's a question about whether any of these individuals are actually related to each other also, because they all pretty much have this similar dynamic going on with the jaw. It's also noted that many of the individuals with the Habsburg phenotype, they are seen as being at the top of the ladder in terms of whatever status they have. And so they might be considered sort of like the royalty within the royalty in terms of the celebrity status. Another thing to consider is that there are claims by a number of individuals that the Habsburg Bourbon families came to the Americas and intermarried with the indigenous people. Now, this would be very interesting for a number of reasons because indigenous people also have some oral dynamics going on. And so we're going to look at some examples of that. It would be very interesting if it was noted that certain individuals not only had the Habsburg phenotype dynamic, but they also had the dental dynamic that is synonymous with, for the most part, American Indians. And so quickly here, we can see that when looking at the information from the passenger and immigration list, the older list, that there were some bourbons that showed up in the Americas. And so you can see this Lewis bourbon showing up in Louisiana, 1718. And here you see some additional ones showing up with Elizabeth Thibodeau bourbon and Pierre bourbon. And this is an article you can check out on your own related to the genetic profile for Louis the 16th. There's some interesting dynamics going on with respect to the bourbons. And there is suggestion that some of the individuals either currently or in the past were pretenders, meaning they weren't really the actual bourbons. And so it's not completely clear exactly what's going on or what happened, but there is some controversy related to the DNA for this particular family group, the males in particular. And here's the abstract for that particular article if you want to check that out. And this is also a purported family tree related to Louis the 13th and then descending down. And there's additional information in this particular article related to the Y haplogroup for the bourbon males. And there seems to be a correlation between bourbon males and the R1B haplogroup. And you might recall that a number of males that are currently in the United States have that R1B haplogroup. Now, when you start to branch off, it gets a little bit more specific in terms of ancestry, but that basic R1B is prevalent in the Americas, the United States in particular, Jamaica also, Dominican Republic, and of course, Western Europe. And so here's another article that you might want to check out related to the Habsburg monarchy. It's indicating here an Austrian Atlantic, the Habsburg monarchy and the Atlantic world in the 18th century. And so it's a very interesting dynamic, this relationship that is suggested here between the Habsburgs and the Atlantic empires. And here's another article related to the Habsburgs. It's important to keep in mind also that the Spanish and the Irish, in many instances, they are conflated and sometimes they are the same people. There's a similar dynamic going on with France also. So there is a tight relationship between some of these entities in Western Europe. And here's some additional information in Britannica that you might want to check out in terms of what's known as the Habsburg period from 1524 to 1700. Now, for the most part, the Habsburg dynamic in terms of that underbite is manifested on the right-hand side. And so you see that mandibular prognathism. However, there are some individuals that have the reverse, and it's the maxillary prognathism. And so one looks like an overbite and one looks like an underbite. But what's most noteworthy is that significant underbite that you see on the right-hand side. And so that's what we're going to be looking at and looking for in terms of a number of individuals historically and a number of individuals in current times. And we're also going to see a couple of examples of the maxillary, one where it looks like a significant overbite. Now, there's also something that could be termed American Indian teeth, is that the individuals who are American Indian have a tendency, a high tendency, to have what are known as shovel teeth. And if you look, you see that the teeth, the incisors, have little scoops to them. And perhaps if you run your tongue behind your teeth at the top in particular, you might notice that your incisors have a particular form. And so some of them are smooth and some of them are scooped. And so you might notice that simply by running your tongue along the back of your teeth. It has been noted that prior to colonization, 100% of individuals who were identified as American Indian had this shoveling of the teeth. And there are a number of theories about why individuals would have this shoveling. It's noted also in a number of Asian populations, very specific ones. It's not every population. It's not noted for the most part among those who would be considered Europeans or those who would be considered Africans. And so it is definitely something that's noteworthy. So it would be interesting to note individuals possessing both the Habsburg phenotype and these American Indian teeth, because that would perhaps suggest some intermixing for those particular groups of people. We're just going to quickly look at a few of these more phenotypes. And so when we look here, and this is from heraldry in Europe, when we look here, we don't see a prognathism going on with this particular depiction. We also don't see a prominent one manifested here. While the top depiction does not suggest prognathism, if you look at the bottom, you will see that the individual that's sort of in the middle, that individual has that prognathism dynamic going on where there is an overbite appearance. And so the chin is sort of coming in a bit more. And here again, you see that chin coming in. You see the overbite dynamic going on here. These are some very interesting depictions. And then you also see the significant manifestation of the scleral show on a couple of these depictions. And this one has a slight manifestation of an overbite. And here you see this hybrid chimeric situation that looks like half man and half animal. And you also see on the right-hand side with that particular surname, you see the manifestation of that Habsburg dynamic. It's also very interesting that there are all of these depictions of these individuals that are supposed to be in Europe. But I offer to you, when I was in Europe, I never saw any of these things. And this includes being in Germany. This includes being in the Netherlands. And so it's just very interesting that the things that are presented on the internet in particular as being manifestations of things in Europe. I never saw these things in Europe. I didn't see them at the Louvre. I didn't see them at all. And so again, it's just very interesting. And it goes back to that whole dynamic of whether or not what we are seeing through the internet, whether it's accurate. And so if we don't actually see it there, where is it? If, just regular visitors are not seeing it, or individuals who actually live in these places are not seeing these things, if they are not there for their consumption, where are they exactly? Now let's get started with some of these very specific depictions. And so, of course, we know that this is Queen Charlotte. And when you look at Queen Charlotte's phenotype, you can see that Queen Charlotte has a significant underbite. It's not as significant as some others, but it is noteworthy. And what you'll often see when individuals have that Habsburg phenotype is that there may be an attempt to hold the bottom lip closer to the top lip so that it's not automatically clear that you are seeing the Habsburg dynamic. But what's also interesting is this individual who is portraying Queen Charlotte also has a manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. And you can see that individual over to the right hand side. She very much does look like the depictions of Queen Charlotte. And now we can see the Habsburg manifestation as depicted by the Habsburgs. Okay, and so over to the left-hand side, you see the standard manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype, and it's a very pronounced manifestation. And so the chin is protruding, the jaw is protruding out. And then over to the right, you see another manifestation of it. It's also noted that the original individuals with the Habsburg phenotypes had very large lips, very prominent noses. For many people, lips of this size, noses of these sizes, they would be suggestive of what people would consider Negroid features. And so that is actually very noteworthy. You also see the person in the middle who does not have the protruding jaw, but has the jaw going in the other direction. And so that's another manifestation of this royal dynamic. Now, this is said to have come about through breeding inside of the family. So not breeding outside of the family, not marrying outside of the family. So they were trying to maintain power. And one way to maintain power was to marry themselves. And this is interesting because one of the ways of taking power away from indigenous people around the world has been these entities intermarrying with them. And so they are, when they've done that, they've served to dilute the power. And so, of course, it's intentional. And here we're just sort of zooming in on this so that you can see it a lot more clearly. So you just sort of section off the mouth and the nose, and you can see very clearly how it is manifested in these particular depictions. And these depictions go on and on in terms of presentations that you see in these older paintings. What you also see is individuals manifesting this even in current times in terms of being celebrities, manifesting these dynamics when they are depicting the individuals who have the Habsburg features. And so you see that on the right-hand side. And here you see another depiction of this Habsburg dynamic with the jaw doing some protruding at the bottom. And so again, that underbite. Another thing that's noteworthy is that the individual is wearing an earring. It has been noted that a number of depictions of individuals who are classified as Moor, they frequently have on earrings, often a hoop of some sort. And you might even see this in some celebrities. And here again, you see this manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype in other monarchs. And here you can see the depiction again more closely. You can also see that scleral show dynamic going on there. And it seems regardless of how King Charles of the Stuarts is presented, he's always presented with a Habsburg phenotype. And so you see the bottom lip protruding, you see the jaw protruding. And again, here you can see it more closely. It has also been noted, if you look very carefully, that a number of individuals who have been given voice in terms of the public, those who have access to the public ear, those who have prominence, even if it's not your standard celebrity, those individuals often also have this Habsburg dynamic going on. And so it starts to bring into question because it's rather unique, quite frankly. But there is a high prevalence, again, of individuals having it who are given voice, who are given audience. And so you even see that with these two individuals who are discussing evangelicals. And so you see it with both of them. They have totally different phenotypes in general. However, they both share the Habsburg phenotype. It's more pronounced with the individual over on the right hand side, but both of them are manifesting this Habsburg phenotype. And if you start to look more closely, you will start to see it more often. If you don't see it in your regular world, you might start to see it more often if you are paying attention to individuals of prominence, those again who have voice. Here you can see it more clearly. Here again, you can see it more clearly. You can also notice that there is a spacing of the teeth for this individual. Now, it's not always clear what was going on with the teeth of the different monarchs because they generally did not take pictures wherein they were smiling. Now we're going to look at this royal phenotype manifestation in individuals from distant history, distant past, and also more recent past or even in current times. And so again, the manifestation has been noted significantly with those who are considered stars or celebrities or luminaries, what you would consider the praised ones. So to start off, we are looking at Woody Harrelson. His is very significant, very prominent. There's also a question about the teeth. And so it would be interesting to find out whether or not his teeth correlate with those who are considered indigenous or whether his teeth correlate with other collectives of people, because there are some correlations with respect to sort of teeth phenotype that go with Europeans, that go with Asians, that go with Africans, and go with indigenous Americans. And we've looked at Phil before in relation to King Charles of the Stuarts and also Meghan Markle. And so you can see that his manifestation of that phenotype is very prominent. It's also noted that he has the scleral show. He also is wearing a hoop earring. So Phil has quite a bit going on here in terms of possible ancestry. And here you can see the jaw structure and the teeth a little bit more clearly. Now, what's noteworthy here is that on the right-hand side, you have Phil's children, and you see some manifestations again of the Habsburg dynamic, more with the one that is closer to the left. But then on the left-hand side, what you see are depictions of Phil's parents. And it's noteworthy that both of the parents appear to have some evidence of that Habsburg phenotype. And you can also, of course, see it with Phil even as a baby. And as with Phil, Meghan Markle has significant manifestations of the Habsburg phenotype. Again, it's helpful to look at people when they were younger so that you can get a better understanding of what they looked like when they were born versus what they might look like in current times. But with respect to Meghan Markle, you see it earlier and you still see it today. And so in addition to Meghan having this particular phenotype, we see that Meghan's mother also has the slight Habsburg phenotype going on. It's also noteworthy that the Habsburg phenotype is going along with an individual who now has royalty or nobility status at this point. And so again, there is this correlation that has been noted between this sort of celebrity status and this sort of insinuation of royalty. And we're going to look at a couple of other examples. And of course, it's also noteworthy that the name Meg is associated with greatness. So Meg. And so you can here see that this manifestation is coming primarily from the maternal line versus the paternal line. And related to that individual, we have the individual whose name means divine and goddess. And so we have here Princess Diana. And so not only is this her name, but she also, of course, was of royal status. Not only does Demi Moore have a manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype, hers is slight. With her daughter, it's much more significant. It's interesting to note also that Demi Moore means half, more, or little more. And here you can see the Habsburg phenotype dynamic a little bit more clearly close up. Yeah, we're going around the world with this one. Okay, so now we're going to venture back in time a little bit. And what we have here is Stephen Biko, significantly manifesting the Habsburg phenotype. It's also noted that his name is Stephen. And Stephen, of course, is another way of saying garland. It's another way of saying crown. And here we see a significant Habsburg phenotype with Marcus Garvey. Interestingly, his name means God of War, and he was referred to as Moses. It's also interesting that that's a part of his name. We also have this individual known as Noble Drew Ali. What's interesting is that this name Drew is associated with what are known as the Counts of Drew. And so the name in and of itself suggests nobility. And if I'm recalling correctly, his original name is Timothy Drew. Okay, so here we see another manifestation of a person who existed at a similar time. And this individual has the feature wherein there is the significant overbite, and you can see it in relation to the depiction on the right hand side. Now this individual is supposed to be the prophet of another sort of denomination that was around during the earlier part of the 1900s. Okay. And this person is Paul Nathaniel Johnson. And here we have this individual who goes by another name at this point in time, but originally was named Eugene. And the original name suggests being well born in terms of the meaning of the name, a well born noble. Okay, so again, we have these depictions with this significant manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype, but also a name that is consistent with it. And so we saw that manifestation with Noble Drew Ali. We saw it with Marcus Garvey. We see it with Louis Farrakhan. And we're going to continue on where we can look at some other historical dynamics. Now, Malcolm has a very interesting name. You can definitely see the manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype with Malcolm. But this name means devotee of Saint Columba. The name is related to an individual who is understood as the apostle to the Picts, Picts, the Picts out of Scotland. If you look at the pictures of the Picts, interestingly, they sort of look like indigenous people in the Americas and in some of the islands. You don't hear as much about the Picts, but those individuals are considered the earlier in time individuals for those isles before being conquered. And so now when we look at individuals involved in politics, we see an individual whose name is Anika. And this name is related to an Eastern goddess. You can also see with this individual a significant manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. And here we have Cab Calloway having a significant, again, manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. And consistent with this idea of celebrities being royalty, we have the individual understood as the godfather or the king of soul with a significant Habsburg phenotype. And this is James Brown. We're going to see something very interesting with respect to Berry Gordy, but clearly you can see a significant Habsburg phenotype going on with Berry Gordy. It's really interesting to note how Berry Gordy, when he was younger, how he held his mouth and the manifestation of this phenotype. It's very similar to the depiction of the Ebo man on the right and the left. And so you see this manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype with an individual who is identified as Ebo. It's not clear how prevalent this is among individuals who are identified as Ebo, but with this depiction, we see it very clearly. And here we have Sammy Davis Jr. again with significant manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype, and also with some Spanish ancestry suggested here. And so, of course, it would make sense that this individual would have these significant manifestations. And some people don't know that his ancestry ties back to the Sanchez family, related to this idea of being holy and sacred. Bill Cosby also has manifestations of the Habsburg phenotype, very significant manifestations. Not only does he have that, but he also has significant scleral show being demonstrated when you look at the younger depiction on the left-hand side there. And so you can see when he's younger, he has this manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype, and his name means resolute protector. And here we have a king, if you will, and a president, both manifesting the Habsburg phenotype, but in a very unique way. Now, this, of course, is Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley is known as the king of rock and roll. Sometimes they just shorten it and call him the king. And so you can see the manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype, the chin being very prominent, and also the manifestation of the underbite. Interestingly, there are some similarities between the phenotype of Elvis Presley and Donald Trump. And so with Donald Trump, we also see slight manifestations of the Habsburg phenotype with the lower jaw coming out a little bit more. And we also see that this individual is not only synonymous with royalty, being president, but also synonymous, we've talked about this before, with that whole idea of the 45, which is associated with the Stuarts, by the way. And the name Donald also means world ruler. And here you see what looks like hereditary manifestations, again, of the Habsburg phenotype. And so you can see it with Donald Trump's father, you see it with Donald Trump Jr., and you see it with Eric Trump. And so what's interesting is about all of these names. And so with these names, not only do you have this suggestion of royalty, whether we are talking about Frederick, or whether we were talking about Eric, or whether we were talking about Donald, all of these names suggest ruler. And so with one, it is peaceful ruler. With the other one, just like his father, it is world ruler. And with the other one, Eric, it is eternal ruler. And so this is an entire line of males that have as their names essentially ruler. And now back to another divine goddess name. So in addition to Princess Diana, we have Diana Ross, whose name again means divine goddess. And Diana Ross also has significant manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. Now, looking back at childhood depictions of Oprah Winfrey, you can see very clearly that she has the manifestations of the Habsburg phenotype. What's also interesting is, consistent with these other narratives, this individual is understood as the queen of all media. And so next we have the Queen of Soul, also known as Aretha Franklin. You can see the Habsburg phenotype manifested here. But what you also see is the manifestation of holding the jaw back and the lip in. You can see that more clearly on the right hand side. And that's sort of a theme that you see when you see these depictions of individuals. There is often the pulling the lip back. You saw that with both Donald and Eric Trump, the boys, the sons, and you see it again here with Aretha Franklin. And here you see again a significant manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype with Michelle Obama. And of course, the name Michelle is related to the name which means who is like God. It's a question, who is like God? And of course, the answer is supposed to be no one. But and so this is an individual who also was considered the first lady. And the first lady is in many ways synonymous with sort of the queen. And so this is the individual who's married to a president. And so very similar to a king and his queen. Well, this one, of course, speaks for itself. Okay, so this is the person's name. And so we have Prince with this Habsburg phenotype dynamic going on here, in addition to the scleral show. So Prince has quite a few things that are going on that look very similar to Phil and Meghan Markle, quite frankly. And so his name, just in and of itself, it indicates royalty. And now we have another individual with the Who is Like God name, Michael Jackson, who is known as the King of Pop. What's also noteworthy about Michael Jackson is he gave his children names of royalty. It's interesting because it's almost like a combination of his name and Prince's name. And so the whole Prince Michael dynamic. Again, suggesting a hereditary dynamic going on here, we see that Jermaine Jackson also has the manifestation of that significant overbite and Habsburg phenotype. And you can see it very clearly with David Washington, whose name, of course, is synonymous with Warrior King. And so you see the Habsburg phenotype with David Washington. You also see this Habsburg phenotype with David Washington's mother. And here you can actually see the manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype, not only with David Washington, but with his mother. And here you can see Steve Harvey when he was younger and more recently. And again, you can see very clearly the manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. Moving on, we see quite a bit of symbolism going on here, quite frankly, with Ice Cube. That name Cube is suggestive of the idea of perfection. So that's definitely noteworthy. And then his name, O'Shea, is synonymous with Jesus, Yasha, indicating Savior. You can see very clearly here when looking at Ice Cube when he was younger, you can see the manifestation of the underbite. It's less prominent when you see him as an adult. Next up, we have the individual understood as Queen Bee. So this is Beyonce, of course. And Beyonce also has the manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. And so you can see it very clearly when looking at these depictions. What's also, of course, noteworthy about the name Queen Bee is that that's really Queen Bey. And so there is some suggestion that Beyonce is not only communicating this queen status, but also communicating an identity synonymous with Bey, B-E-Y, or Beg, B-E-G. And of course, next we have Mr. Carter. And Mr. Carter also goes by the name Hova. And for those of you who are not familiar, the name Hova is suggestive of a deity, so deity status going on here. And you can see clearly the manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype with this individual. And so it might stand to reason that the children of both Beyonce and Mr. Carter, that their children might also significantly manifest the Habsburg phenotype. And you can see this with the little girl named Blue Ivy. And there's a note here that indicates that she is dressed like music royalty in a white princess dress at the Grammys. And indeed, she did look princess like at the Grammys. And so there is this, again, suggestion of royalty status. And of course, we've addressed the name of Rihanna before. And if you recall, it is essentially queen, goddess, and ruler. So there's a lot going on with this particular name that is suggesting rulership. And so you can see very clearly here that Rihanna has significant manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. Next, we see Chris Brown, who has a significant manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. It's also noted that his daughter has been given the name royalty. And so, again, you see sort of this theme going on with this Habsburg manifestation and these suggestions of royalty or nobility. It's unclear about the extent to which these people know their ancestry, but it is noteworthy that there is a sort of theme that's going on with individuals who you see of prominence with these Habsburg phenotype dynamics. Ah, yes, Mr. Tupac. And so Tupac, that's not his original name. However, the name that was chosen for him, for reasons that are not completely clear, that name means royal serpent. It also is indicative of emperor. And so the name that was chosen for Tupac is a name that indicates royalty. And you can clearly see whether you were looking at younger pictures or you're looking at more recent pictures that Tupac had a significant manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. And here you can see the little emperor when he was really little, and you can see it even then with his baby teeth. And so here we have Kanye with, again, this manifestation of the Habsburg phenotype. When younger, however, the jaw was going inward quite a bit, but when older, the jaw coming out a bit more. But regardless, younger or older, there is this manifestation of this Habsburg dynamic. And then, of course, we have the name Yeezus, which is suggestive of Jesus, which of course is related to the idea of not only a king, but the King of Kings. It's also noteworthy that Kanye has named his son Saint. And so, again, you see these names that are coming from the celebrities or that are given to the celebrities or the names that they've adopted being related to this idea of high status, celebrated status, praised status. And so we see this high prevalence of this phenotype among those who are considered celebrity, that are, again, prominent, those individuals who are given a voice or who have been given a voice historically. And the question is there a connection between this phenotype that you see with these individuals and the actual Habsburg dynasty? Are they related? Are they descended from these individuals? Again, there is an interesting relationship between the Habsburgs and the Americas. It's not completely clear what the totality of the relationship is, but there's also a relationship between them and the Bourbons. And so there is a lot going on with all of these connections. And then when you look at the surnames of a number of these individuals, some of their surnames suggest that in terms of patrilineal ancestry, that their ancestors perhaps came from some of those areas like Scotland and Ireland and England and France and Spain and Germany or Austria. And so there is a suggestion of a connection. The question is there an actual connection? Because the structure of the mouth and the teeth, these two phenotype dynamics actually can be used in terms of forensics to identify someone and also to identify or show a correlation with a particular ethnic group. And so the teeth are very important. They actually point to different ethnicities. And this Habsburg phenotype is extremely noteworthy, and it is pointing to a particular line of ancestry. That scleral show is also noteworthy, just like the epicanthic fold is noteworthy with respect to the eyes, and those things point to sharing ancestry with different groups of people. And so it doesn't mean, sometimes people think when they see these similarities or they see these DNA studies that it means that they came from the people that exist today. But what it really means is that there is a shared ancestor. It's not that you came from the people. And so that's why the ancestry stuff is sometimes very misleading, because you'll have individuals that will say, oh, it shows that, they are from Africa or they are from Scotland. It doesn't show that. What it shows is that there are some people in Scotland or there are some people in Ghana that have a similar DNA, they have similar DNA markers. Okay, what that's saying is that both of those individuals come from, according to what's being suggested, a common ancestor. They are not each other's ancestors. And so it's not, they are more like siblings or more like cousins. And so you can think of it like they share a grandparent somewhere back in time. And perhaps very close in time or very distant in time. But that's what's being communicated with respect to these DNA sorts of studies. And that's also what's being communicated with respect to these phenotypes and these teeth dynamics. And here you can see all of these individuals have this Habsburg-like phenotype. Now, it's of course noted that the Habsburgs might not have created the phenotype, but it is heavily manifested with them. And so it's interesting because you see an individual over on the right-hand side who is, in terms of identity, tracing back to that Circassian area, the Caucasus area. And then you have another individual who is tracing back to Africa. And so that's the individual that is second to the left. And then you have these other individuals who are supposed to be European descended. But all of them have this very significant manifestation of what we are calling now the Habsburg phenotype.